Hello, welcome to Know the Faith, Defend the Faith. My name is William Hemsworth, and for those of you on YouTube, welcome here to the Bible Catholic channel here on YouTube. Hope everyone is doing well. Thank you for joining me. I know this week's show is just a little bit late. My apologies for that. Had some internet issues this week. Stuff happens sometimes, but here we are. It's a little late in the week, but better late than never. Now, the good news, though, is next week I'm going to have two shows for you guys. We're going to have a couple good interviews. One with Keith Little, who's going to talk about a great ministry that he has, the principles for daily living, biblical principles for daily living. Good stuff. And then Matthew Chacoin, we're going to talk about the Eucharist, biblical evidence for the Eucharist. Those will be dropping next week. So thanks for your patience. But we're going to have a couple good things coming for you. Today I want to talk about the resurrection. Why is the resurrection so important? Every Easter we celebrate the resurrection of Christ. Actually, every Sunday, really. And it's the foundation of our faith. And without the resurrection, our faith is futile, as 1 Corinthians 15:14 says. Now, beyond proving that Jesus is the Christ, what does the resurrection prove? You see, the resurrection is about much more than the eyewitness accounts of the apostles seeing the risen Jesus. It's also about the new life that is present in you and I and every believer throughout time. You see, we have finite minds. It's hard for us to grasp the miracle of the resurrection. See, Jesus is a divine being, and as a divine being, he resurrected from the dead to prove who he was. Now, theologically true, this view kind of leads us to maybe a somewhat simplistic understanding of the resurrection. The resurrection can also be seen, like I said a moment ago, in the transformation of the believer. It's about the new life in Christ and not about the ocular vision that the disciples perceived. St. Paul kind of talks about this in 2 Corinthians 5:17, where he writes, "So if anyone is in Christ, there is a new creation. Everything old has passed away. See, everything has become new." Now, the resurrection is a religious experience of one who has come to faith in Christ, and it's much more than something that happened physically to Jesus, although, that is a key part. Now, according to scholars such as Luke Johnson, this is a common theme in St. Paul's work. He writes, "The resurrection experience in Paul's letters is not something that happens to Jesus alone." That's from Luke Johnson. "Every Christian with a genuine faith in Christ experiences the resurrection in a special way through the sacrament of baptism. Through the sacrament of baptism, original sin is wiped away, and we're raised to the newness of life." Within the context of introducing the resurrection, there are a couple things to keep in mind. From an apologetic standpoint, it's important to know the reasoning as to why the resurrection is the foundation of our faith. You see, one can go into the martyrdom of the early church, whether it be Ignatius of Antioch, Polycarp, St. Perpetua, just name them. You can go in, look into their martyrdoms, into the histories of the early church, and they were attesting to the resurrection. Here's a simple fact. People do not die for a lie. There's no way the resurrection was fake. It wasn't something that the apostles made up because they died for it. You don't die for something that you honestly know is a lie. Now, secondly, it's important to learn to relate the resurrection in a deeper way, in a way that's more personal and something that someone can share. Everyone has something deep within our mind that we're ashamed of. Every one of us has it. We all have skeletons in the closet. It may be an addiction, adultery, gambling problem, whatever, you name it. These things are destructive. But when one comes to faith, these things are kind of in the past, even though we still may have our struggles. But through Christ, we have that newness of life. We share in that resurrection, and we're forgiven for those things that we've done. Those types of experiences are kind of like the modern day equivalent of the disciples physically seeing the resurrected Jesus. Our former selves are dead and gone. But we're resurrected spiritually into a new creation. The disciples' experience of Jesus raised and exalted is a difference between their faith in the gospel. Their lives changed, even though they physically saw it. You believe in Christ? Want sincerity? You've been baptized? You've received the sacrament of baptism? You share in that resurrection. Let's live it. Let's live that. God bless you all. Thank you for joining me in this episode. Have a great week. And like I said, we'll be joining you next week with two episodes. We'll do double duty to make up for this one coming out late. God bless you all.